What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back with another Borderlands 2 Top 10 Weapons video, and today I'd like to go over what I think are the top 10 best assault rifles in Borderlands 2. Now, like my last couple videos going over launchers and snipers, this video will include newly added gear from the Commander Lilith DLC, and the rankings here are once again going to be weighted based on how powerful, how rare, and how useful or good a given assault rifle is. You should find that all of the rifles that made it onto this list are great choices, though I think you'll find that the higher picks on the list tend to be truly exceptional. Also, and as always, definitely be sure to smash like on this video to help prevent contracting the T virus, and also leave a comment in the comment section below letting me know what your favorite Borderlands 2 assault rifle is. But again, smashing the like button on this video will ensure that you receive a free first aid spray, so definitely be sure to do that. But enough of the video game references, let's just go ahead here and get started with our number 10 entry, which is going to be the Ogre. Even though I'm not a huge fan of it, I think I would even have to admit that the Ogre from Borderlands 2 is a pretty great assault rifle, even if it's not quite as powerful or as ridiculous as the Ajax Ogre from Borderlands 1. Essentially, the Ogre in Borderlands 2 is a lot like a Torgue Spitter. However, the difference is that it has some upgraded stats and also has a special effect which will randomly allow the Ogre to achieve boosted fire rate and reload speed, while also allowing the bullets to ricochet. Funnily enough, while I do have issues with the fact that it's a spinning gun assault rifle, I think the real issue I have with the Ogre is that it's just really hard to get. It only drops from Warlord Slog, who is an enemy that only spawns during the Magic Slaughter's Badass round, and this fact alone can make getting your hands on one of these things pretty difficult. After all, you have to fight through a slew of enemies, you have to get Warlord Slog to spawn, and then when you manage to defeat him, there's no guarantee that you'll actually get an Ogre to drop. If you can get one of these though, I think the slippery prefix variants are the best due to how they boost the speed of the slower Torgue gyrojet projectiles that the Ogre fires. But in general, this should be a decent weapon for all characters and would be especially nice for explosive Krieg builds. Number 9. The Sawbar. While I wouldn't recommend you use it as your main or go-to assault rifle, the Sawbar is actually a pretty good assault rifle all things considered and can be a great choice for anyone that's looking for a decently powerful fire weapon to take on bosses. What the Sawbar does is fires an initial projectile that travels through the air, and then 3 unlisted projectiles split off while the initial continues to travel. These 3 projectiles will then travel a very small distance in a short, sort of triangular pattern, and then explode into fireballs, dealing damage. Keep in mind that you're still able to hit enemies at considerable range with the initial projectile, it's just the split exploding projectiles are more ranged based, and in order to really take advantage of them, you'll have to practice proper distancing to your intended target. I'll admit I'm a bit rusty at this, but the main thing you're going to want to keep an eye on is your projectile speed, as that determines the distance at which the projectile split takes place. So if you're playing as 0, be sure and be careful not to put too many points into velocity if you plan on using this thing. Otherwise, I think you'll find that the Sawbar is actually a pretty good assault rifle, and if you want it, it's obtainable where other first-gen pearlescents are. This means you can try the Commander Lilith DLC bosses, the legendary loot midgets, or oh my god what the heck at Digistruct Peak. Number 8. The Toothpick. The Toothpick is a pretty interesting gun in that it combines the attributes of several different doll weapons and rolls them all into one. You may notice that the 5x horizontal projectile pattern is very similar to what you might see on the Pitchfork, and the ×2 projectile multiplier is very similar to the doll double tap rifle. Interestingly, and rather than possessing a 2-round burst like the double tap rifle, the Toothpick appears to possess a 3-round burst that doesn't appear to be able to be increased by ensuring the weapon has doll parts. Functionally, the Toothpick is actually pretty powerful and tends to work really well against enemies that are wide, as all 5 or I guess 10 of the projectiles that fire can more easily hit those types of enemies. Additionally, this weapon goes really well with the mouthwash relic and also pairs fairly well with the retainer shield, provided the player is at the writhing deep location. So it's highly recommended that you pair those items with the Toothpick. The only real problem I think you're going to have with this gun largely revolves around its ammo consumption. While the Fire Elemental exclusivity presents its own limitations, I'd have to say that it's really the ammo cost of 6 ammo per shot that's the most detrimental and may prove to be too steep for some players. So if you plan on using it, it might be a good idea to equip a backup weapon or play as Salvador and then just regenerate all of that ammo back. Even still, I would say that despite the ammo consumption issues, I like the Toothpick and believe that it would be worthy to incorporate into your arsenal. If you want one, be sure to farm the sandworms that appear in some of the earlier areas of the burrows in the Commander Lilith DLC. Number 7. The Gatling Gun. Though you might actually think it sucks since most spinning gun assault rifles that are available do, the Gatling Gun is actually one of the better assault rifles and one of the best Jacobs assault rifles that's available in Borderlands 2. This is largely thanks to the Gatling Gun's ×3 projectile multiplier, which can up the damage for this weapon considerably and actually make it hit a little bit harder than some of the legendaries like the Hammerbuster and M2828 Dumpson. I think my only real complaint with the Gatling Gun mainly has to do with the ammo consumption. It's not as bad as the Toothpick is, but 3 bullets per shot can be pretty high sometimes, and this in my opinion necessitates a flush prefix or a magazine size accessory if you plan on using the Gatling Gun. If you play Axton, you may find that you can use a rifleman comm to bypass the need for a flush prefix. However, I would still recommend you eventually get a Gatling Gun that does have a flush prefix. Overall though, the Gatling Gun is actually a pretty great assault rifle in this game, and while there's no designated drop since it's a non-unique weapon, all you have to really do is just keep your eyes peeled for these. Gemstone variants are also available, so be sure to visit Butt Stallion if you want one of those. Number 6. The Kitten. Between featuring a ×3 projectile multiplier, being able to come in all elements, and being a Vladov-manufactured Moxie assault rifle, I think we can all agree that it's not really that surprising that the Kitten would be a great weapon. After all, being able to heal at a rate of about 4% of damage dealt, along with a high rate of fire and a projectile multiplier, this thing is just a really great weapon to have. With that said, the Kitten does have its issues, and it's not going to be a go-to assault rifle in all situations. For example, the Kitten's smiley face projectile pattern ensures some level of consistent accuracy, but due to the nature of the pattern itself, the weapon's range is greatly reduced. It's also worth noting that the Kitten is just really bad against anything with physical armor or shielding, so for example, if you're going up against something like a Nomad with one of those iron shields, you're gonna probably not want to use the Kitten. Aside from these minor gripes though, the Kitten is quite lethal and is a gun you should definitely pick up. All you need is the Torg DLC, and from there, you just have to complete the Everybody Wants to Be Wanted side quest mission, and this weapon can be yours. Number 5. The Peak Opener. Of all 3 of the newly added Commander Lilith DLC assault rifles, I think I'd have to say that the Peak Opener is by far my favorite, and while that may bias the placement of this assault rifle on this list somewhat, I think you'll find that, like me, that you like this rifle quite a lot as well. For all intents and purposes, the Peak Opener is essentially just a souped-up version of the Kerblaster with a few key differences. Obviously, it's a shock elemental weapon, making it the only elemental weapon in Borderlands 2. There's the fact that it gains increased fire rate while aiming down the sight, which is similar to many Dahl weapons, and instead of just 1 child grenade spawning from 1 rocket, the Peak Opener allows for 3, considerably upping the damage and by extension, the weapon's DPS. Another thing that's great about the Peak Opener as well is the fact that the Peak Opener is a part of the Hadorax Effervescent set, which includes the Easy Mode Shield and the Hard Carry Relic. When you combine all 3 of these items together at Digistruct Peak, you can increase the Peak Opener's damage in addition to boosting your fight for your lifetime, which makes taking on the Peak a bit easier than it normally would otherwise be. So, if you want to get your hands on a Peak Opener, it's received by farming the Hadorax chests upon defeating Hadorax in the Writhing Deep. You can also find the Hard Carry and Easy Mode support items here as well, so definitely be sure to come here if you're interested in the Peak Opener or either of those items. Number 4. The Rapier. This might sound weird, but the Rapier is actually a pretty awful assault rifle when used conventionally, and this largely comes down to its below average base damage, which in turn contributes to poor DPS. However, and the reason the Rapier made it onto this list and is at a high ranking is because it is without a doubt the strongest melee weapon in Borderlands 2. For the uninitiated, most bladed melee weapons cap out at around 50% melee damage bonus, while the Rapier caps out at about 200% melee damage bonus, making it about 4 times more powerful than the average. It also unsurprisingly makes it a great choice for melee builds, whether you are playing Zero or Krieg. All this said though, the Rapier isn't without some issues. Perhaps the biggest one is due to it being a cursed Captain Blade weapon. The Rapier has its own curse, which causes the player to take increased damage from melee attacks while it's equipped in hand. This affects some characters more than others, and I would say it probably affects Krieg the most since Krieg can cloak. But if you're playing as Zero, you can always just cloak and use Deception while you use the Rapier to finish off enemies with melee attacks. Despite the curse though, the Rapier is a pretty fantastic weapon to have for any melee build and will definitely come in handy if you can get a slag variant. If you want one, the Rapier can be acquired by completing the Message in a Bottle side quest that's located in Hater's Folly in the Captain Scarlet DLC. Number 3. The Hail. While a bit awkward to learn to use at first, the Hail is one of my favorite assault rifles in Borderlands 2. All one has to do is to be sure to raise your field of view in the settings menu, and then simply aim downwards to try and get the projectiles to arc up into an enemy. This will allow you to deal damage with the initial projectile up close, which is surprisingly powerful given some of the Hail's unique properties. In particular, not only is the Hail capable of dealing splash damage and has a very high critical hit bonus as far as assault rifles are concerned, but it's also worth noting that the Hail is a Moxie weapon and thus, it allows the player to heal for a portion of the damage that's dealt. This is at a rate of about 3%, which isn't really that high, but I think is more than made up for thanks in part to how the Hail can benefit from grenade damage bonus on Axton, and also has the potential to spawn a secondary unlisted projectile after the initial projectile travels a certain distance. As you might guess, since this projectile is unlisted, it receives full amp damage from the B shield, potentially making the Hail a great choice to pair with the B for roughly double the damage you would normally deal. I'd have to say that the only thing that would make this thing better would be if it was a little easier to learn how to use, but aside from that, I think you'll find that the Hail is a fantastic choice of an assault rifle, and if you want it, the Hail is obtained as a quest reward for completing the 5th round of Fink's Slaughterhouse located in the fridge. Number 2. The Lead Storm. As far as Seraph gear is concerned, the Lead Storm is quite possibly one of the best Seraph weapons that you can buy with Seraph crystals. I'll get into why that is in just a moment, but if you want to get your hands on one of these, all you have to do is visit the Seraph vendor in the Hunter's Grotto Lodge in the Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt DLC, and you should be able to purchase one of these in any difficulty, including Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. As for why the Lead Storm is so good though, it largely comes down to how it's a weird cross between the legendary Shreddifier, which is known for its high fire rate, and the Hail Assault Rifle, which is known for its secondary projectile. Much like the Hail, the Lead Storm is capable of spawning secondary projectiles, and rather than just spawning one like the Hail does, the Lead Storm really can spawn 2 additional projectiles, yielding roughly 3 times the damage you would normally be able to deal. Add on the high fire rate you can achieve, and this weapon should yield some pretty monstrous DPS, especially when paired with the B shield, as all 3 of these spawned unlisted projectiles will receive amp damage. The only real downsides here are the lack of splash damage and the healing that you are going to be seeing on the Hail. However, the Lead Storm on the other hand can spawn an additional projectile and is a little bit easier to use. Again, and if you want one of these, you can buy one from the Seraph vendor in the Big Game Hunt DLC. Just be sure to take your time and get one of these with great parts, as it will definitely be worth it. And for our final entry, number 1, the Evil Smasher. While this would have been the number 1 entry at one time, it's no longer the best assault rifle in the game and is now quite possibly one of the worst. However, our actual number 1 is going to be the Bekaa. When it comes to Jacob's assault rifles in Borderlands 2, I think it's fair to say that the Bekaa is unmatched in terms of ammo consumption, potential damage output, and just coolness factor. It's difficult to explain exactly what this gun does, but what happens is when you fire the initial projectile, it seems to split into 2, with one freezing in place while the other maintains its current velocity. After a little while, the second projectile then starts traveling again, but then splits into 3, effectively allowing the player to hit enemies more than twice with the same shot, which I guess is why the red text reads, "Shoot them in the face twice." As you can imagine, this effect is quite powerful as you're getting 2 or maybe 4 shots for the cost of 1. And given that all Jacob's assault rifles have a pretty high fire rate, and the Bekaa in particular has 3 unlisted projectiles that can benefit from the B, and it's pretty easy to see why the Bekaa is so good. The only thing that would make the Bekaa better in my opinion would be if it was an automatic weapon and came in all elements. It really is a great assault rifle, and if you want a Bekaa, your best bet is to acquire one from Tubby's in Ultimate Voltage mode after you've reached level 61 or higher. You'll need the Digistruct Peak DLC as well, but you should have that if you're playing on PS4 and Xbox One. Alright guys, I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to smash like, feel free to click the bell if you want to see more videos like this, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.